In March 2000, a routine night out turned into pure horror for 18-year-old Sophia Martinez in El Paso, Texas. She was young, full of dreams, and just minutes away from a safe return home, until she stopped at an ATM and was ambushed. What followed was every parent's nightmare: a violent carjacking, a forced cash withdrawal, and a terrifying drive into the desert, where Sophia was sexually assaulted and executed with 5 shots to the head. But the most chilling part? Her killer didn't even know her. He chose her at random, for $200 and a twisted sense of control. That man was William Josef Berkley, a 21-year-old drifter with a gun, a cold heart, and a friend who helped him plan the attack. And in the end, it would take nearly 2 decades, multiple appeals, and a final meal before Berkley would face the ultimate consequence on Texas death row. To understand how one of El Paso's most haunting crimes unfolded, and what Berkley said just seconds before the lethal injection, we have to go back to where it all began. But first, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon, because this is the kind of case that stays with you long after the screen fades to black. William Josef Berkley was born on January 16, 1979, a time and place that gave little warning of the darkness that would one day emerge from within him. To most, he appeared unremarkable, just another young man navigating the streets of Texas, quiet and unassuming. But behind that silence, something far more dangerous was festering. There were no flashing warning lights, no dramatic signs of evil early on, just subtle, creeping signs: restlessness, emotional detachment, and a simmering hunger for control. As Berkley grew older, those traits hardened. He drifted toward the wrong people, clung to the wrong ideas, and began shaping a life defined by recklessness, intimidation, and impulse. Power to him came from fear. And by the time he hit 21, that hunger had transformed him from a troubled young man into a full-blown predator. One who believed life was something to take, not something to respect. Fueled by desperation and an eagerness to dominate, Berkley found a partner in crime in Michelangelo Jacques. Together, they hatched a simple but violent plan: rob someone at an ATM to settle court debts. A plan that would require a victim. And in a cruel twist of fate, that victim would be someone the world could never afford to lose. Sophia Martinez was everything Berkley wasn't. She was radiant, hopeful, and good down to her core. Just 18 years old, Sophia had her entire future ahead of her. Born and raised in El Paso, Texas, she came from a loving, tight-knit Hispanic family who taught her the value of hard work, kindness, and dreams. She had just graduated from high school and was on the verge of blossoming into the life she had always imagined: college, career, independence. She was known for her gentle soul, her love of dancing, and her contagious smile that made others feel seen and safe. Sophia wasn't just a daughter, she was her family's heartbeat. She worked part-time to help fund her education, always putting others before herself. Friends described her as strong, sweet, and quietly ambitious. She had plans. She had purpose. She had people who adored her. It was the night of March 10, 2000, and for 18-year-old Sophia Martinez, it was supposed to be a simple, carefree evening. She left her home around 10:15 p.m., dressed and ready to enjoy a night out at a local nightclub in El Paso, Texas. A quick break from her busy routine of work, family, and school prep. She waved goodbye to her family, unaware it would be the last time they would ever see her alive. Sophia was cautious by nature, but like most young women in her community, she didn't expect violence to be lurking just around the corner of something as ordinary as stopping at an ATM. At exactly 10:22 p.m., surveillance footage from a credit union ATM showed Sophia pulling up in her car, parking calmly, and stepping out to withdraw a small amount, just $20. There was nothing unusual in her movements. She wasn't in distress, wasn't looking over her shoulder, just going about her night, like she'd probably done dozens of times before. But what she didn't know was that someone was already watching her. Hiding in the bushes nearby was William Josef Berkley, armed with a pistol, waiting for a signal from his accomplice, Michelangelo Jacques, who sat in a nearby vehicle, scanning for a suitable victim. When Jacques saw Sophia's car, new, clean, and likely tied to someone who had a little money, he flashed his headlights once. That was all it took. At 10:24 p.m., Berkley emerged from the shadows with cold, calculated intent. He approached the passenger side of Sophia's car, gun in hand, and without hesitation shattered the window with the muzzle of his .25 caliber pistol, startling Sophia and sending shards of glass across the seat. Bleeding and terrified, she tried to comply, and Berkley quickly circled around the vehicle, forcing himself into the back seat of her car. He pressed the gun to her, barking commands. Sophia, now in survival mode, followed every instruction, hoping this would end if she just cooperated. At 10:25 p.m., with a trembling hand, Sophia withdrew another $200 from the ATM. Her final transaction, her last trace of life captured on camera. At this point, the surveillance footage cuts out. What happened next would never be fully captured on tape, but the details would later surface through confessions and cold hard evidence. According to later testimony, Berkley ordered Sophia to drive, gun still pressed against her ribs, as he navigated her away from the city lights and toward a remote desert area in northeast El Paso. The ride was long and filled with fear. Sophia, injured and disoriented, likely knew she was being taken somewhere bad, but still might have held on to a sliver of hope that she'd make it out alive. Instead, her worst fears came true. When they arrived at the secluded area, far from witnesses, far from help, Berkley sexually assaulted her, robbing her of both dignity and hope. And then, as if that cruelty wasn't enough, he pulled the trigger 5 times, shooting her execution style in the head and face, ensuring there was no chance she would survive. Alone, wounded, and discarded like nothing more than an object, Sophia Martinez died there in the dirt. Her young life ended in the most brutal way imaginable. Even more damning, forensic analysis confirmed that sperm samples found on Sophia's body matched Berkley's DNA. The case was airtight, the horror undeniable. The final hours of Sophia Martinez's life revealed a predator who had stalked her in the night, used her for money, stolen her innocence, and extinguished her life, then tried to erase all evidence like it meant nothing. As the city of El Paso reeled from the shocking discovery of Sophia Martinez's body, homicide detectives wasted no time launching a full-scale investigation, an urgent pursuit that began with only a handful of critical clues. A grainy ATM security footage showing Sophia withdrawing money under apparent duress, and the violent condition in which her body was found. The case rapidly gained momentum when investigators matched partial fingerprints and traced DNA evidence left behind at the crime scene and inside her vehicle. Evidence that would soon point in a chilling direction. But what truly cracked the case wide open wasn't just science. It was betrayal, desperation, and a guilty conscience. Michael Jacques, the quiet accomplice in the shadows, had a secret that wasn't sitting well with someone very close to him, his wife. Suspicious of his sudden agitation, erratic behavior, and the way he couldn't stop checking the news, she confronted him. What spilled out wasn't a full confession, but it was enough for her to alert authorities. That tip sent detectives straight to Jacques' apartment, and what they uncovered there was both disturbing and damning. It was confirmed that shortly after Sophia was murdered, William Berkley visited Jacques at his apartment complex. In a crude and panicked attempt to destroy evidence, Berkley had taken Sophia's driver's license and burned it on the metal grate of Jacques' backyard grill, watching her identity turn to ash in a flame of denial and cowardice. But that wasn't all. He had also tossed her car keys onto the roof of the complex, perhaps thinking no one would ever think to look there. He was wrong. Acting on a hunch, investigators climbed the roof and, to their astonishment, found the keys exactly where Jacques' wife had said they would be, rusted, sun-bleached, but unmistakably belonging to Sophia Martinez. Inside the apartment and surrounding areas, police recovered multiple items that tied Berkley to the crime: blood-stained materials, DNA remnants, and most critically the weapon believed to have been used in the attack. Forensic analysis didn't lie. It matched Berkley's genetic profile with overwhelming certainty. With mounting evidence piling up, detectives obtained warrants and searched Berkley's own residence. There, more incriminating findings were unearthed, painting a clear picture of premeditation and brutality. It became evident that this was not just a robbery gone wrong, it was a cold-blooded execution carried out by someone who believed he could outrun the law, erase a life, and walk away untouched. The pieces were coming together rapidly now, and Berkley was no longer just a suspect. He was the prime suspect in a case that had gripped the entire city. El Paso law enforcement, working around the clock, were relentless in their pursuit of justice. Every clue, every footprint, every piece of fabric was examined and re-examined, stitched together like a forensic tapestry of the final terrifying moments of Sophia's life. The investigators knew that time was of the essence, but they also knew they were closing in. A warrant was signed. Arrest teams were mobilized and they arrested William Josef Berkley. Michelangelo Jacques claimed he only helped plan the ATM robbery, insisting he never intended for anything to go beyond a shaken victim, but he eventually admitted that the events spiraled out of control when Berkley brutally executed Sophia Martinez, acting far beyond what they had discussed. Jacques testified that he believed the plan was just to force her into withdrawing cash, not to force her to drive to an isolated area, rape her, and murder her, but the prosecution showed that he continued to assist afterward, staying silent while Berkley burned Sophia's driver's license on a grill at Jacques' apartment and tossed her car keys onto the roof to hide them. Despite his later cooperation, the court found his assistance in planning the crime and covering up the evidence made him morally complicit, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the trial of William Josef Berkley began, the courtroom was flooded with a heavy silence, the kind that hangs over proceedings when the loss is unbearable and the evidence is undeniable. Prosecutors from El Paso County laid out a devastating case, piece by piece, starting with surveillance footage showing Berkley forcing Sophia Martinez at gunpoint to withdraw $200 from an ATM just hours before her body was found, a video that became a chilling timestamp of her final moments alive. They presented forensic reports indicating Berkley's DNA was found not only on Sophia's body but also in her car and on items retrieved from the rooftop of Michael Jacques' apartment, including the very keys Sophia carried the night she vanished. One of the most damning testimonies came from the medical examiner, who confirmed that Sophia had been sexually assaulted and shot execution-style in the back of the head with a .25 caliber weapon, a detail that aligned precisely with the firearm recovered from Berkley's location and matched ballistically to the bullet found in Sophia's skull. During the trial, members of Sophia's family, her parents, siblings and childhood friends, spoke during the victim impact statements, painting a vivid picture of a bright, compassionate young woman whose dreams were abruptly stolen. One relative broke down on the stand, describing how Sophia's bedroom remained untouched, as if she might walk back through the door at any moment. The jury needed little time to deliberate before reaching a unanimous decision. William Josef Berkley was found guilty of capital murder, and due to the presence of multiple aggravating factors including rape, armed robbery and the cold-blooded, premeditated nature of the killing, the court handed down the ultimate punishment: death by lethal injection. On Texas death row, Berkley was known as quiet and reserved, rarely interacting with others, though prison officials noted that he exhibited no signs of remorse. His appeals spanned years, but each one was rejected, including his federal habeas corpus claims, where courts reaffirmed that his rights were not violated and the conviction stood on a mountain of irrefutable evidence. On the final day of his life, April 22, 2010, William Josef Berkley, now 31 years old and facing the irreversible consequences of his horrific crime, was offered one last indulgence. A final meal which he made sure was both lavish and telling of his unapologetic attitude, consisting of 2 bacon, lettuce and tomato cheeseburgers, 2 jalapeño cheeseburgers, a generous serving of fried okra, a large portion of French fries with both ketchup and mustard, several rich brownies, scoops of chocolate, and vanilla ice cream, and not 1 but 3 root beers, a menu that seemed less like a reflection of remorse and more like a celebration of self, his last opportunity to exercise control in a system that had rendered him powerless. Then, as he was strapped to the gurney inside the Huntsville unit's death chamber with the clock ticking toward 6 p.m., witnesses including his loved ones and the family of Sophia Martinez watched in silence as Berkley turned his head toward the glass and delivered a final statement that offered no acknowledgement of guilt, no expression of sorrow for the life he stole, but instead a cryptic, emotionally loaded farewell. "Samantha, I love you with all my heart and soul. Corey, thanks for everything. Make sure my princess is all right. Death before dishonor. Corey, I think you should continue with criminal law. It's your decision. They need lawyers out there that will fight. Death before dishonor. Warden, let her rip. Thank you for coming, Irene." These were the final chilling words of a man who, despite overwhelming evidence, a conviction for capital murder and the relentless grief left behind, chose to exit this world without an apology, without acknowledging Sophia Martinez or the suffering of her loved ones, instead focusing on a personal, almost defiant mantra of death before dishonor, a phrase he repeated twice as if it could mask the moral bankruptcy of his actions, leaving behind an unsettling legacy and a courtroom still haunted by the pain of a life stolen far too soon. One young life, full of promise and dreams, was brutally stolen in a moment of calculated violence, and another was slowly extinguished years later by lethal injection, the tragic conclusion to a chain of choices born from cruelty, betrayal, and darkness. As we reflect on the haunting case of William Josef Berkley, we must ask ourselves, were the scales of justice truly balanced? Did the death penalty bring closure, or only echo the loss with another death? What deeper failures in society, in upbringing, in accountability, led to this irreversible tragedy? We want to hear from you. Do you believe the death penalty delivered justice in this case, or did it simply continue the cycle of death and destruction? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more in-depth true crime stories that reveal the darkest corners of the American justice system, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Every story matters, and your voice is part of the conversation.